Test, test, test. Oops. Je li najavljujete govornike ili? Okay. So, thank you for the few people who stayed without knowing what they're staying for. My name is Željko Blaće, and I'm going to continue on this line of sex and body topics, and maybe focusing a little bit more on sexualities and less on porn, and more about body in sport rather than entertainment and music. So I'm coming from Zagreb, Croatia, and I'm kind of introducing myself in different contexts as artist, activist, or researcher. And the work I would be showing is kind of in between these fields, in between these segments of my practices. So it involves both the academic research, both the activist practice and the artistic practice. Did any of you ever took part in sport professionally? Like, have you ever trained sport? Can you raise hands if you ever trained? You did, too. Okay. Wrong crowd. Yeah, this is the important thing to discover who is your crowd when you want to present. Yeah, very few of us in the cultural scene, in the scene of people who are involved with critical culture are involved in sports, especially at that professional level that we usually associate with the notion of the sport. For me, personally, sport basically as a kind of professional idea of professionalism ended up when I was 18. And when I had to choose whether I go to art school or whether I follow the volleyball training I was into. And the choice was, of course, very easy. All of my life I was seeing myself as an artist and waking up to train early in the morning and do it again during the day for becoming a sport professional would be a much harder choice. So the fact that I identify now as queer and then I identified as, let's say, different or outside of norms also helped my decision to remove myself from the sport, from this environment in where sexing and kind of macho dynamics of competing and training in like this hyper masculinized environment makes me feel like an alien. So for about 10 years I didn't take part in the sports, and then as a part of my art practice I was in New York and I got introduced to gay sports for the first time in my life. And I'm guessing very few, if anyone, please raise hands if you heard of gay Olympics. Okay, few have. So back in 2002, I was in New York and it was gay Olympics happening in Sydney, and these were one of the biggest gay Olympics happening since its founding in 1982 in San Francisco. And it got together around 10,000 people from all over the world. It was all over the gay media press, and of course it was appearing all over in online media. So for me it was kind of a new notion that something of this scale exists. Of course, when I was a young athlete I was always hearing about Martina Navratilova being open lesbian and no gay guys ever appearing as an open athletes. So there was some notion that you could be gay in sport. No one did it, at least no one except Martina. But I had no idea that they could actually gather 10,000 people at one place and organize something at the scale of Olympics. So I decided to investigate this. I went to a swimming club in New York that was explicitly gay, and that kind of welcomed me as someone coming from Balkans, being exotic and whatever, young and curious. And then I realized, although we practiced at 7 o'clock in the morning, and this was like, for me, super harsh conditions to wake up at 6, go across Manhattan and you know, dress down to swim shorts and start swimming at 7 a.m. I realized after the swimming practice that the community that was around the sport was totally different from what was my previous experience in sport. It was really kind of supportive, it was welcoming, it was not at all about stereotyping, it was very playful, very flirty. Somehow there was also sexual tension, but it was never kind of as sexual as as straight people would imagine gay Olympics would be. Anyway, a few years later, I was back in Croatia, traveling as an artist, taking part in gay competitions individually, and then realized I'm really missing on something of that back in my home country. And I started doing looking for people who would be interested in starting a gay volleyball team. So by 2005 I managed to find, so it took me 2 years to find 5 guys in Croatia, not in Zagreb but in Split, who would actually play volleyball or want to play volleyball, want to compete on European level. So we went to Euro Games, which is the European Championship for gay and lesbian athletes, competed and won a gold. It was not the kind of gold medal in absolute terms, it was B-level gold, but still it was a gold. And it kind of made all of us feel amazing about ourselves, yet we felt really depressed because we couldn't share this excitement and this experience when we got back to Croatia. It was even more disturbing when one of the professional players who joined us, and he's kind of amazing player, one of the biggest players in Croatian kind of volleyball history, he actually gave me his medal and his sport shirt because he was so intimidated by the fact that someone could find this when he was crossing the border or something would happen and his career would finish. So at that point I realized not being out in case of a regular person is like a kind of identity politics and something you can choose, but if you're a professional athlete it's really much worse. So 10 years later, now I'm giving kind of public presentations about what queer sport is. Or I feel much more comfortable. The professional athlete is still in closet, still kind of fighting with his own situation. It's similar still in professional sport. Basically, only 3 months ago we had the first NBA player from any of the 4 big US sports to come out as gay. And he's only coming out as gay basketball player because he's kind of finishing his career. And this is kind of a depressing situation. So, but I'm not going to talk about this. I would like to talk about how we can own sport and what would idea of queer sport be. So my research was basically about how these tensions in between sport as super normative system where everyone knows its place, everyone gets specific position based on their results, and everyone is expected to confirm that they are either feminine or masculine, that they are either super strong or they are weak, relates to something as queer identity or expression of our queer identity. So I'm not considering that sport should be taken for granted as is. This is something that most of us do if we just watch professional sports and media. I'm thinking of what sport could be. And this is where kind of my research starts. It's time for the next slide. So, see. Oops, it's not my laptop, so I'm kind of losing. This is as queer as you can get in high-level sports aesthetically when you do synchronized swimming. It's kind of interesting sport because no one really takes it super seriously if they haven't tried to practice it. It's like super, super difficult. It's much more difficult than swimming, much more difficult than gymnastics. It's basically doing swimming, diving, gymnastics, acrobatics at the same time without any resistance surfaces. So you have to create all of the force yourself. And you still have to be elegant and smile artificially whenever you inhale for that breath of water. So it's kind of a really bizarre situation in which Spanish competitors establish a kind of style which I personally see as queer, although they probably don't call it queer. They basically started since a few years ago performing in really strange clothes, with really strange music, and with really strange choreographies. So in terms of aesthetics, if you ever watched Olympics or World Championship, you always see these Russians winning golds with these ballet poses and like amazing classical music, and everything is elegant and beautiful. And then you can see the runner-ups far behind being Spanish. They're either second or third in each competition. But they decided to make a little bit more fun for themselves. So they started doing choreographies on really abstract music. They don't care about being beautiful and exotic and elegant. They care about being exotic and being queer. So like in the Olympics before the last in Beijing, they actually performed a jungle-like performance in which they used abstract sounds of animals. And for the first time, they did something that was never seen in synchronized swimming as choreography. They climbed each other, and they expressed as monkeys. And this is something absolutely impossible to think in synchronized swimming. There is no element that would say, give 3 points to someone who acts really good as a monkey. So there was a kind of tension for a moment when they were deciding how do they merit the performance. So judges took extra few minutes to consider whether they should, punish them for doing this or whether they should reward them. If they reward them, what would the reward be? Would this be like some innovation points or whatever? And actually, for the first time in like 20 years of synchronized swimming, people were considering maybe this is more interesting than the Russian perfect image. Unfortunately, they won silver again, but it was a kind of fringe moment where you could consider that something queer could happen. This is me attempting to do synchronized swimming with Irene Marchot. She is a Canadian, Swiss, French, I'm not sure, synchronized swimmer. And she's doing kind of community synchronized swimming practices. You can follow her online as Synchro Chick. And she is like super overweight, super happy about being overweight, not trying any diets, doing amazing synchronized swimming, and still looking beautiful in different way than what Russian synchronized swimmers would do. So this is the, what is the time? Can you? Okay. So, up. So this was very inspiring moment for me to look at, and this is one of the points where I started my research of where does queerness in sport start? Oops. Where do slides start? Is this online or not anymore? Okay, možeš onda uključiti. So, historically speaking, one can look at ideas of sexuality as kind of contemporary issues that people before sexual liberation in the 70s didn't think whether you conform to a specific sex, to a specific gender, or this is something new. Oops, this is a bit too far. Okay, now spoilers. Okay, go back. Okay. Now you see everything backwards. So probably the most interesting historic figure is dating back from 1930s, from the time when Nazi Germany tried to do amazing Olympics. And they try, especially in athletics, to prove this Übermensch idea with having all the best athletes. It takes a bit of time, I guess, to download. Okay. If you know movies of Leni Riefenstahl, she was doing this Triumph of Will documentary film that was basically celebrating the beauty and the power of the nation, or of the athleticism, and it's still one of the most kind of controversial films about sport event in particular. But what was the big issue for Germany? They didn't have as amazing athletes as they wanted. So, for example, in high jump, the best high jumper in Germany at the time was Jewish. Female Jewish high jumper, of course, could not perform because it was already Nazi Germany. So they introduced a new performer, new athlete, but you can also say performer actually, who was actually a trans person. It was a guy who performed as female high jumper, who was cross-dressing for 3 years, performing kind of high jumps at different athletic meetings, that actually came to Olympics as female representative of Germany. So you can imagine the perversion of having Nazi Germany putting a trans person hoping to win a medal, and of course he doesn't do so well, and he ends up being, I think, 7th at the end. But his name is Katja Ratjen, and there is a documentary about this. I don't know why it's now not showing. So you'll see the image a bit later, I guess. Okay. So the second image, okay, I'll just. Yeah, Dora Ratjen, sorry. Yeah, Dora was later discovered to be, of course, the guy, and was kind of absent from the post-World War II athletics, as you can imagine. The second image I'm showing is Carl Lewis. If you followed sprinting and athletics in 80s, he was by far the best sprinter. He would be winning all the sprinting disciplines. He would be winning also in jumping, and basically all of this time there was speculation that he was gay, and this was never communicated in any way. He could not risk to lose sponsorship, and he never did it. Actually, until today, he's still kind of sports official that is not out as gay person. But for Pirelli calendar, Annie Leibovitz, a lesbian photographer, of course wanted to play with this idea, so she came with this motto, the La potenza è nulla senza controllo, which, yeah, the power is nothing without control, but putting him on high heels, basically kind of reflecting on his situation of how he needs to keep up his masculine appearance, even though he is not as what you would suspect of him. The next image I'm showing is probably the most important athlete in past years who have disturbed so much of the sport field. Semenya, she is South African sprinter, 800-meter sprinter, who was competing in Berlin again, 1800 meters race world championship, and won it posing like a guy, looking like a guy, yet being in female competition. So it took about 1 year of speculations in media, in federations to kind of determine which sex is she, what is happening, is she going to be allowed to perform, and now she's back as an athlete after, I guess, some surgery, after some hormonal treatment. It seems that she has been an intersex person without knowing herself. Many intersex people, especially in kind of developing countries where doctors are not as informed, grow beyond puberty and never really know that they are intersex individuals. What you see on the right side is an image that her PR kind of manager wanted to present to the public that was accusing her of masculinity. So these are kind of public examples that you could come across. 5 more minutes. Okay, so I'm going back to this community sports and gay games. This is an image of Thai national team at the World Out Games in Copenhagen. By the way, this year's World Out Games are in Antwerp. Here are the flyers if someone is interested in looking at that. This is probably the most interesting national team you can imagine. It's packed with guys who are playing with sexuality in their kind of gender roles, looking always super exotic, all the way from like super muscular torsos with kind of cross-dressing clothes and performing at very high level. So my first actual kind of volleyball team was supposed to be Thai team in Munich 2004. They didn't get visas, so I didn't get to play with them. But they are like the most famous for the cult movie in a trans community called Iron Ladies. And it's a documentary, no, it's actually fiction based on documentary material. So there was a national team, a team playing in the National League of Thailand that was composed of 2 gay guys, 1 trans person, 1 straight, and I think bisexual or something like this, that actually managed to win a national competition being out as the gay queer team, being super flamboyant, being super kind of flirty and playful. And the national federations was so embarrassed that these are the best volleyball players of the Thailand that they canceled their international performances. So for that year, Thailand didn't have any team sent to the international competitions. This is a kind of European version of Thai team. It's a team basically made up from Thai diaspora in Europe. So this is what is really amazing about gay or queer sports, is that people competing in these competitions that are basically recreational can have a chance to form teams that would never normally work in regular leagues. So from this group, there are only 2 players that live in the same city and train together. So they came from all over Europe, living in different cities, but because they're excellent players, they managed to win tournaments. Like in the Out Games in Copenhagen, then they won the tournament. This is my volleyball team from Out Games in Montreal, and this is what makes kind of queer sport really exceptional. I was able to play, unlike ever in my regular volleyball, with people of 4 races. I was able to play with the Asian guy, with the 2 black guys, and with Apache Indian. How often do you get to have Apache Indian in your volleyball team? And then we thought, okay, how do you manage like identity of a team that's coming from 4 continents, 4 different races, and then the Japanese guy bought us shirts with stickers United Nations, and then the Apache Indian said, fuck, I cannot wear this. United Nations don't recognize Apache Indians as indigenous nation. So we were like, yeah. So I was, ever since then I was thinking there is so much more politics of identity happening outside of just choosing whether you are male or female, whether you conform to national flag or identity or whatever. I should be finishing, yes? Okay, so super fast. This is the gay athletics in Barcelona, I think, in 2008. You can see people from all over the world competing together, like having really non-competitive, super kind of casual atmosphere in which there is like this black guy is Cuban discus record holder, South American champion, who was throwing discus in competitions with people who did it maybe 2 or 3 times in their life. And he was having the fun of his life. He was like really enthusiastic about the competition and the atmosphere and everything. And these 4 guys were doing these fun medley races as a nude team. They didn't want, they were coming from 4 different countries, they didn't want to have any references of any specific identity, so they stripped off totally except for sprinting shoes, and they raced this way, and they won the gold, or silver, I don't remember. Okay. So one of the most interesting cases for me to research and to work over is synchronized swimming for men. Now you would think, okay, the synchronized swimming I was mentioning before was kind of more aesthetical issue, whether you can do something that is not feminine and elegant. But what do you do when you have men doing synchronized swimming? Men are actually forbidden to compete in synchronized swimming internationally. So the federation that regulates FINA synchronized swimming basically doesn't allow any competitors to appear in international events, and if they do, they punish the organizers with, I don't know how big fees, but basically only within gay competitions they are allowed to compete, although they are not all gay. For example, the black and white poster is a documentary about Norwegian straight men doing synchronized swimming. So, okay, I'll just do the last one. Yeah. Okay, if you want to get in touch, keep informed about this, or just a second. There is a website, queersport.info and qsport.info for Croatia. That kind of lists a little bit of the work I'm doing in this field. Not all, I'm not really good at documenting, I have to say, but you can check. And if you want to join us, we have branches in Zagreb and Split. We still struggle with establishing a branch in Rijeka, but there are people organized in Belgrade and Montenegro and elsewhere. So please send us an email and join us if you want. You don't have to be gay to take part in queer sports.